The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan shimmered like a jewel box under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, where the air was thick with the mingled scents of rare orchids, aged Scotch, and the subtle florals of Chanel No. 5 wafting from the gowns of New York's most untouchable elite. It was the annual Blackwood Foundation Charity Gala, an event that drew the city's power brokers, socialites, and philanthropists under the guise of raising millions for underprivileged youth, though whispers among the waitstaff suggested more than a few deals were sealed in the shadowed alcoves over clinking champagne flutes. Scarlet Monroe, a 32-year-old investigative journalist for the New York Tribune, had wangled an invitation through sheer tenacity. Her blood-red cocktail dress, a thrift store find altered by her roommate Maya into something fierce and form-fitting, clinging to her curves like a second skin as she navigated the sea of designer labels. With her auburn waves pinned loosely to one side and green eyes sharp as emeralds, Scarlet stood out not for her elegance, but for the quiet fire in her posture. A woman who'd clawed her way from Ohio newsrooms to Manhattan's cutthroat press corps, exposing corruption in City Hall and corporate boardrooms alike. Tonight, she was on the hunt for a lead on Blackwood Enterprises' rumored offshore tax havens, her reporter's notebook disguised as a chick clutch tucked under her arm. But the evening's undercurrent of superficial chatter about Hampton's weekends and the latest Sotheby's auction grated against her impatience. She sipped her sparkling water laced with lime, scanning the room for James Blackwood himself, the elusive CEO whose empire spanned real estate, tech startups, and shadowy investments that fueled endless speculation in her newsroom. Little did she know, the night's drama would pivot not on a leaked document, but on a collision of egos that would rewrite her life in indelible ink. James Blackwood, at 34, was the undisputed king of the room, his presence a gravitational force that bent conversations and parted crowds like the Red Sea. Towering at 6'3" with broad shoulders honed by private trainers and a jawline that could cut glass, he glided through the throng in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that cost more than Scarlet's monthly rent, his dark hair impeccably styled and blue eyes, cold as Arctic steel, surveying the gala with the detached appraisal of a man who viewed the world as his personal acquisition ledger. Orphaned young and raised by his formidable grandmother Eleanor, who'd bootstrapped Blackwood Enterprises from a single textile mill into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, James had inherited not just wealth, but the ruthless pragmatism that came with it. He was Forbes' perennial most eligible bachelor, a title that masked his aversion to genuine connection, preferring transactional liaisons with models and influencers who signed NDAs as readily as they signed selfies. The spotting Scarlet from across the room, her red dress a defiant flame amid the sea of neutrals. He felt an inexplicable pull, perhaps the thrill of the unattainable or the challenge of her unyielding gaze, as she scribbled notes while pretending to mingle. Emboldened by 3 fingers of single malt and the gala's electric hum, he approached her near the grand piano, where the orchestra's rendition of Gershwin provided a velvet backdrop. "Miss Monroe," he drawled, his voice a low timbre that carried the faint lilt of Eton polish over Brooklyn grit. "I've read your pieces on urban development. Scathing, but accurate. Care to discuss over a drink, say, da 100 Zalozen for your company tonight?" The proposition landed like a misfired grenade, crude and presumptuous, his smirk implying she was just another story to conquer. Scarlet's blood boiled, her reporter's instinct for sniffing out entitlement flaring into full blaze. In that instant, the room's opulence faded, narrowing to the arrogant tilt of his head and the casual dismissal in his eyes, as if her Pulitzer-nominated exposés were mere foreplay to his wallet. The slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot in a cathedral. the sharp crack of Scarlet's palm against James's cheek reverberating off the gilded walls and silencing the murmur of 200 conversations mid-sentence. Conversations halted, forks paused en route to crystal plates, and the orchestra faltered on a sustained violin note, the conductor's bow hovering in disbelief as all eyes swiveled to the epicenter of the disturbance. Scarlet's hand stung from the impact, her red nails leaving a vivid imprint on James's otherwise flawless complexion. A blooming rose of indignation that clashed spectacularly with his black bow tie, while her chest heaved with the righteous fury of a woman who'd spent years dismantling the very entitlement he embodied. "You arrogant jerk!" She spat, her voice slicing through the stunned hush like a headline in 40-point bold, green eyes blazing with the unfiltered scorn of someone who'd exposed senators and CEOs alike, but never faced such blatant objectification on a silver platter. James reeled not from the physical blow, though it smarted like hell, but from the sheer audacity, his mind blanking for the first time since a hostile takeover boardroom brawl a decade prior. No one touched James Blackwood, not his ex-wives in divorce court, not his rivals in proxy fights, and certainly not a fiery journalist in a borrowed gown. He touched his cheek instinctively, the warmth of her palm lingering like a brand, his blue eyes widening in a cocktail of shock, amusement, and something dangerously close to intrigue as the room's elite gawked. Old money Harrises gasping behind manicured hands, tech moguls smirking into their phones, the air electric with the scent of impending scandal. Whispers erupted like fireworks. Did she just slap Blackwood? Ooh, is that redhead? This'll be tomorrow's front page. Scarlet stood her ground, chin lifted in defiance, her clutch spilling a lipstick and a pen onto the marble floor unnoticed, the weight of 200 stares fueling her resolve rather than crumbling it. She'd faced down corrupt mayors in press conferences and heartbroken sources in dimly lit diners, but this was personal, a line crossed in the sanctum of high society's performative benevolence. Into this frozen tableau slithered Derek Matthews, Scarlet's ex-fiancé, his Armani suit rumpled from too many pre-gala martinis, arm looped possessively around a bleach, blonde social climber named Denise whose laugh tinkled like cheap wind chimes. Derek, a mid-level editor at a rival rag with ambitions as inflated as his ego, had shattered their 2-year engagement 3 months prior in a spectacular betrayal. Caught in flagrante with Scarlet's former roommate and confidante, a betrayal splashed across tabloid blind items that painted her as the jilted harpy while he emerged the remorseful rogue. Spotting the commotion, his thin lips curled into a venomous smirk, the kind that had once charmed her over late-night deadlines but now curdled like spoiled milk. Well, if it isn't little Scarlet Monroe, he drawled, his voice oily with Fox sympathy, stepping forward with Denise in tow, her sequined sheath dress catching the light like fool's gold. Slumming it with the big leagues now. Or is this your idea of upward mobility, trading ethics for a slap on the wrist? The crowd's murmurs swelled into a symphony of schadenfreude, cell phones emerging like vultures to capture the fresh carrion, flashes popping as Denise tittered, her acrylic nails digging into Derek's arm like talons. Scarlet's face drained of color, the gala's glamour fracturing into a nightmare redux. The sting of Derek's public jilting replaying in real time, his whispers to editors about her own stable temperament, still echoing in her stalled career. Freelance gigs drying up as doors slammed on her once promising byline. James, still cradling his slapped cheek, clocked the shift in her demeanor, the way her shoulders tensed, eyes flickering with the raw vulnerability of old wounds ripped open, and something primal stirred in him. A protective instinct untempered by his usual calculations of risk and reward. The room held its collective breath, the orchestra resuming a tentative waltz that underscored the drama like a bad rom-com score as Derek leaned in, his breath sour with gin. "Come on," Scar, we all know you're better at stirring pots than serving truth. This billionaire's just your latest headline." Denise's hyena cackle sealed it, the humiliation cresting like a wave poised to drown. In a move as audacious as it was inexplicable, James Blackwood, billionaire bachelor, bastion of boardroom invincibility, bridged the chasm between them with a single, decisive step, positioning himself at Scarlet's side like a knight materializing from the ether. The room's hush deepened to a pin, drop reverence as he slid one arm around her waist, firm yet gentle, his palm warm against the silk of her dress, while his free hand tilted her chin upward with a tenderness that belied the storm in his eyes. "Sorry, darling," he murmured, his voice a low rumble meant for her ears alone, laced with an intimacy that felt both rehearsed and raw, his blue gaze locking onto her emerald one with an intensity that short-circuited her fury into something electric and unforeseen. Time dilated, the gala's opulence blurring into irrelevance, the chandeliers dimming to peripheral stars, the whispers fading to white noise, as James closed the distance, his lips claiming hers in a kiss that was anything but tentative. It was cinematic, voracious, the kind of embrace scripted for silver screens, where heroes reclaim the narrative, his mouth firm and unyielding at first, tasting of champagne and determination, then softening into an exploration that coaxed a gasp from her throat, her hands fisting the lapels of his tuxedo as if anchoring herself against the vertigo of sensation. Fireworks weren't metaphorical. Actual sparks danced in her veins, knees buckling under the onslaught of heat that radiated from his frame, his free hand threading into her auburn waves to cradle her head, deepening the kiss until the world contracted to the salt of his skin and the thunder of her pulse. When they parted, breathless and flushed, the ballroom remained suspended in stunned tableau, Derek's jaw unhinged, his malice curdling into pallid shock, Denise's hyena laugh choked into silence, her grip on his arm slackening like a deflating balloon, the elite frozen in a collective gasp, phones trembling in manicured fists as flashes erupted anew. James, undeterred, kept Scarlet tucked against him, his lips curving into a predatory smile that broadcast triumph without apology. "Now," he declared, his voice booming with the authority of a man who'd closed empires on less. "Did someone mention something about my fiancée?" The word landed like a gauntlet, igniting the room in a frenzy of murmurs and applause. Scarlet's mind reeling from the kiss's aftershocks, lips tingling, heart hammering, as she whispered against his collar, "You're completely mad." "Utterly," he agreed, pressing a light kiss to her forehead. "But it worked, didn't it?" And in that electric aftermath, as Derek slunk away with his trophy in humiliated tow, Scarlet felt the first treacherous bloom of possibility amid the chaos. What if madness, in the right hands, could rewrite scandals into serendipity? The Blackwood estate in the Hamptons unfolded before Scarlet Monroe like a living monument to old money and unyielding ambition, its sprawling acres of manicured lawns and ivy, cloaked stone facades evoking the grandeur of a bygone gilded age where fortunes were forged in steel and scandal. From the moment James's sleek Tesla crested the private drive, gravel crunching under tires that cost more than her monthly salary, Scarlet felt the weight of invisible eyes upon her, the estate's omnipresent staff, gliding like ghosts in starched uniforms, the distant wear of groundskeepers tending topiaries shaped with surgical precision, and the ever-present hum of security cameras winking from gabled eaves. Eleanor Blackwood, the iron-willed matriarch who'd clawed Blackwood Enterprises from the ashes of post-war textile mills into a behemoth spanning global supply chains and Silicon Valley ventures, had orchestrated this extended engagement celebration. With the tactical brilliance of a general marshalling troops, her invitation delivered via courier on engraved vellum that reeked of finality. 2 weeks to observe the authenticity of your union, she'd declared over a tense brunch the day after their plaza infamy. her sharp blue eyes, mirrors of James's own, dissecting Scarlet like a forensic exhibit, probing for cracks in the facade they'd hastily erected from half-truths and stolen kisses. James, ever the dutiful grandson, had acquiesced with a jaw-clenched nod, but Scarlet glimpsed the flicker of resentment in his gaze, a rare chink in the armor of the man who'd navigated hostile takeovers with the ease of a chess grandmaster. As Harrison, the butler whose tenure spanned 4 decades and whose discretion rivaled Swiss banking vaults, escorted them to their suites, hers the opulent blue room with its 4 poster-canopied in azure silk and views of the Atlantic crashing against pebbled shores, his the austere master adjacent, separated by a shared balcony that mocked their enforced proximity. Scarlet wondered if this interlude was less a celebration and more a crucible, designed to smelt pretense from truth under the unrelenting heat of familial judgment. Eleanor's scrutiny began subtly, like the first tendrils of fog rolling in from the sound, manifesting in orchestrated, casual encounters that peeled back layers of Scarlet's carefully curated poise with the precision of a scalpel. Breakfasts in the sun-drenched conservatory, where crystal decanters of fresh, squeezed blood orange juice and platters of artisanal cheeses arrived via silent footmen, doubled as interrogations disguised as maternal curiosity. Eleanor, perched like a silver, maned sphinx in a cashmere twinset that whispered of Scottish mills and Parisian ateliers, would probe Scarlet's Ohio roots with questions laced in honeyed barbs. However did a girl from the Rust Belt navigate the piranha pools of Manhattan journalism without losing her Midwestern naivety? Each inquiry a veiled test of resilience, as if expecting Scarlet to crumble under the weight of her own humble provenance. James, seated across the linen-draped table with his sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded from stress-induced gym sessions, would interject with avuncular charm, recounting apocryphal tales of their courtship, the fictional rainy afternoon at the Strand where he'd rescued her from a tumbling stack of investigative tomes, or the impromptu picnic in Central Park where he'd proposed under a canopy of autumn maples. But Scarlet caught the strain in his laughter, the way his fingers drummed the porcelain saucer, betraying the exhaustion of sustaining a narrative woven from smoke and mirrors. Afternoons brought a state tours that doubled as endurance trials strolls through the rose gardens where hybrid blooms. Eleanor's personal obsession, each petal a testament to her unyielding will, served as backdrops for discourses on legacy, Eleanor waxing poetic about the Blackwood ethos of fortitude forged in fire, her gloved hand gesturing to heirloom portraits of stern ancestors who'd weathered depressions and wars, implicitly challenging Scarlet to prove she could weather the Blackwood tempests without welting. Evenings culminated in formal dinners with rotating casts of old friends, silver-haired titans of industry, whose monocled gazes appraised Scarlet's poise over foie gras and vintage Bordeaux. Their queries veiled in compliments: "Me dear, how do you intend to balance a career in the volatile press with the demands of our little circle?" Each word a probe for fractures, leaving Scarlet's temples throbbing as she parried with wit sharpened by years of press scrums and source wrangling. Complications escalated with the serpent, like a rival of Marcus Blackwood, James's cousin and Eleanor's wayward scion, whose unannounced descent upon the estate midway through the first week injected venom into the already taut proceedings, transforming familial oversight into a high-stakes chess match where every glance and gesture was a potential gambit. Marcus, a lithe 38-year-old with James's patrician features twisted into perpetual sneer, hair slicked to a predatory sheen, eyes narrowed like a ferret scenting weakness, had long nursed ambitions for the Blackwood throne, viewing his cousin not as kin, but as an interloper who'd stolen the crown through sheer nepotistic luck rather than merit. Arriving in a flame-red Ferrari that screamed midlife crisis, He alighted with a bottle of 82 Lafite Rothschild under one arm and a predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes, proclaiming his visit a spontaneous familial olive branch, while his gaze raked Scarlet from hemline to hairpin, as if cataloging her unsuitability for the Blackwood pantheon. Over brandy in the mahogany-paneled library, walls lined with first editions from Dickens to Drucker, the air heavy with leather and aged oak, Marcus wasted no time in unleashing his arsenal, his queries couched in fraternal concern. "Scarlet, darling, how precisely did a Tribune stringer capture the heart of our elusive James? Was it the exposés on tax dodges, or perhaps a more personal interview technique?" His laughter, a brittle bark, echoed off the vaulted ceilings, but Scarlet met it with a journalist's unflinching stare, countering with a dissection of Marcus's own checkered resume, his string of failed startups bankrolled by family slush funds, his tabloid, fodder affairs that had once splashed across page 6 like confetti. James, sensing the powder keg, intervened with clipped authority, thus steering the discourse to neutral harbors, like vintage car collections and polo matches, but not before Marcus slipped a silver card into Scarlet's palm during a feigned powder. "Room escort? Darling, if you ever tire of playing house with the golden boy, my number's here. Discretion guaranteed, and the view from my yacht is divine." The encounter left Scarlet's skin crawling, a visceral reminder that in the Blackwood orbit, alliances were as fluid as fortunes, and scrutiny wasn't merely maternal. It was predatory, laced with the kin, slaying ambition that had simmered since Marcus's boyhood exclusion from the heir apparent's shadow, as the week's midpoint blurred into a haze of relentless observation. Eleanor's spontaneous croquet matches on the East Lawn, where Scarlet's grudging knowledge but no respite from post-game dissections of her Midwestern swing, or midnight kitchen raids where James and Scarlet raided Maria's larder for gelato, only to find Anor ensconced at the island with a decanter of Armar ensconced at the Ease Long where I thought our magna. Dissecting their body language like a CIA profiler, the complications metastasized into personal tempests that tested the brittle scaffolding of their charade. Scarlet's nights devolved into insomnia, fueled vigils on her canopied bed, the Atlantic's rhythmic roar beyond the sash windows a mocking lullaby as she replayed Marcus's insinuations, his only insinuations burrowing like ticks into her insecurities. Was she truly Blackwood material, or merely a journalistic novelty, a red-dress distraction for a man whose heart was as fortified as his firewalls? James, too, unraveled in parallel, his days consumed by frantic calls to PR firms quashing rumors of shotgun weddings and gold-digging ingenues, only to collapse into her suite after midnight, tie askew and eyes shadowed, confessing over smuggled bottles of Veuve Clicquot, the suffocating legacy of Eleanor's expectations. The way she'd molded him post-parents crash into a vessel for the empire, love a luxury deferred for quarterly reports and quarterly conquests. Their private moments, stolen balcony trysts where they'd rehearse coupledom with scripted endearments and choreographed caresses, blurred perilously into authenticity, a brush of knuckles igniting sparks that neither acknowledged, James's gaze lingering on the curve of her neck as if memorizing a map to uncharted territories. Marcus's machinations peaked midweek with a clandestine leak to a society columnist, a blurred photo of Scarlet's thrift store gown tag, captioned "Cinderella's hand, me downs," that splashed across digital dailies by dawn, forcing James into damage control while Scarlet, stealing her reporter's spine, penned an anonymous op-ed excoriating classist gatekeeping in elite circles, her byline's anonymity a thin veil over the fury boiling in her veins. Eleanor, ever the oracle, summoned them to her private salon that evening, a sanctum of velvet drapes and Fabergé eggs where the air hummed with the ghosts of dynastic whispers. Her verdict delivered over Darjeeling in bone china. "Marcus tests you as I tested James, survive him, and the throne is yours." but in the salon's flickering gaslight, as James's hand found Scarlet's under the tea table, a squeeze that spoke volumes of solidarity and unspoken longing. She glimpsed the true complication, not family machinations, but the treacherous alchemy of pretense transmuting into passion, where scrutiny from without paled against the rising tide of emotions threatening to drown them from within. By week's end, the estate's gilded cage had warped into a pressure cooker of revelations and rifts, Marcus's shadow lengthening with each intercepted glance and whispered asides to butlers who reported back with the fidelity of Cold War spies, his campaign of doubt culminating in a midnight confrontation in the billiard room where brandy decanters gleamed like accusatory eyes under the green, shaded lamps. Scarlet, unable to sleep after a dinner where Marcus had regaled the table with musing anecdotes of James's commitment, phobic youth, embellished tales of jilted debutantes and prenup, dodging flings designed to paint her as the latest fool in a long line, had descended for a glass of milk, only to find Marcus ensconced in a leather wingback, swirling amber liquid with the nonchalance of a Bond villain. "Can't sleep, Scarlet dear," he'd purred, his cologne cloying as overripe fruit. "Or is the weight of your little charade keeping you up?" Her denial instinctive. He'd leaned forward, voice a conspiratorial hiss. "I know all about the contract. 6 months of play acting for Eleanor's blessing and James's inheritance. Clever, really, but sloppy. Your strand meat cute. Has more holes than Swiss cheese." Panic clawed her throat, but journalist grit surfaced, countering with feigned amusement. "Envy doesn't suit you, Marcus. If you spent half as much energy building something as tearing it down, you'd have your own empire." His retaliation was swift. A dossier slid across the baize table, pages of fabricated evidence, doctored timestamps on there, romantic texts, blurred photos suggesting paid companionship, whispers from sources about Scarlet's opportunistic past. "Walk away now," he'd urged, eyes gleaming with schadenfreude. "Before I unleash this to the board, James loses the company, you lose your credibility, and we all pretend this farce never happened." Trembling with rage, Scarlet had fled to the balcony, the night's chill biting through her silk robe, only for James to find her there, his silhouette materializing from the gloom like a guardian specter. In the moonlight's silver wash, confessions cascaded, his plaza fixation on her bylines, the fabricated breadcrumbs to fortify their lie. The terror of losing her to Marcus's machinations, each admission a fissure in their armor, mending into something raw and real as she pulled him close, their kiss a defiant seal against the encroaching storm. Dawn brought Eleanor's intervention, summoning Marcus to her study where, behind closed doors, echoing with the crack of paternal thunder, she dismantled his plot with the precision of a corporate raider, dossiers confiscated, loyalties reaffirmed, a veiled threat of disinheritance that left him ashen and exiled to his Manhattan-pied terror. Yet the victory was Pyrrhic, the week's tall etching lines of exhaustion on James's brow and doubt's shadow in Scarlet's eyes. The family's scrutiny, not just a gauntlet but a mirror, reflecting the fragility of their bond and the seductive peril of letting pretense bloom into perilously authentic love. As the second week loomed, laden with garden parties and yacht soirees where society sirens circled like sharks scenting vulnerability, Scarlet and James clung to each other in stolen moments. Whispers in the library's alcoves, fingers laced under damask cloths, their rising complications not merely external machinations, but the internal alchemy of hearts learning to trust amid the ruins of deception. The facade of Scarlet Monroe and James Blackwood's engagement, meticulously constructed from the ashes of that infamous plaza slap and salvage kiss, began to fracture under the relentless pressure of Eleanor's Hampton's inquisition, like fine porcelain yielding to an unseen fault line. Each casual dinner and orchestrated croquet match chipping away at the varnish of their scripted affection. By the second week's midpoint, the Blue Room, once a sanctuary of silk, canopied escape, had become Scarlet's nocturnal confessional, where she'd pace the Persian rugs in bare feet, the Atlantic's ceaseless murmur beyond the casements a mocking echo of her inner turmoil, replaying Marcus's venomous whispers and Mr. Chen's damning evidence that wove their fiction into an impossibly authentic tapestry. Sleep eluded her, chased away by the ghost of James's pre-plaza fixation, a revelation that slithered through her defenses like smoke under a door, igniting a blaze of betrayal mingled with unwelcome thrill. He'd watched her from afar, not as a predator, but as a man ensnared by her byline's fire, curating a shadow courtship through voicemails to voiceless lines and reservations for phantom dates, all to armor their lie against scrutiny. Dawn found her hollow-eyed at the breakfast conservatory, where Eleanor's probing queries over blood-orange mimosas. "Tell me, dear, what stirs a woman's heart in this age of fleeting swipes and filtered facades?" Probed deeper than family lore, forcing Scarlet to confront the insidious creep of authenticity, the way James's hand sought hers under damask cloths, not for show but solace. His laughter at her sardonic quips blooming genuine in the candlelit library, the quiet hours on the balcony where he'd confess the loneliness of his gilded cage, his voice cracking on tales of orphaned boyhood molded by Eleanor's unyielding forge. These weren't performances, they were fissures, cracks through which vulnerability seeped, the transforming their contractual charade into a labyrinth of longing where doubt and desire danced a treacherous tango, leaving Scarlet adrift in a sea of what-ifs. What if the slap had been fate's cue, not folly? What if the kiss, born of impulse, had ignited a spark neither could extinguish? Complications crested like a rogue wave on the eve of their engagement fortnights. Climax, Marcus's machinations erupting into open warfare during a starlit yacht soiree off the Sound, where crystal decanters of Dom P.A. Rignan frothed against silver rails and society's sirens, bedecked in Van Cleef emeralds and whispers of indiscretions, circled the deck like sharks scenting blood in the water. Scarlet, resplendent in a sapphire gown that hugged her like a lover's promise, had steeled herself for the evening's gauntlet. Eleanor's surprise guest list bloated with Marcus's cronies, silver-tongued venture capitalists whose probing toasts masked interrogations on her meteoric rise. From Ohio obscurity to Blackwood consort, their laughter brittle as spun sugar when she parried with tales of investigative trenches dug in rain, lashed alleys and corrupt council chambers. James, ever the bastion, anchored her side with a possessive arm that felt less performative and more primal, his blue eyes flashing warnings at Marcus across the teak deck, where the cousin lounged against the helm with a flute of champagne and a dossier disguised as a yachting magazine, its pages dog-eared at inconsistencies he'd fabricated from thin air, doctored timestamps on their romantic text, blurred paparazzi shots implying paid companionship, whispers from anonymous sources, painting Scarlet as a social climber with a resume riddled with ethical elisions. The confrontation ignited amid the yacht's gentle rock, Marcus cornering them near the stern where bioluminescent waves lapped like conspirators, his voice a silken blade. "Admire your commitment, cousin," slapped to alter in a fortnight's farce, "but Eleanor's no fool, and neither am I. This journalist ingenue, a prop for your inheritance play, her bylines bought with boardroom promises." James's retort was thunderclapped fury, fists clenching the rail until knuckles blanched, but Scarlet, journalist's blood surging like adrenaline, intervened with a scalpel's edge, dissecting Marcus's bluster. "Envy's a poor vintage, Marcus. While you chase shadows of stolen thrones, James builds empires from vision. Perhaps invest in a mirror before spying on ours." The deck hushed, Eleanor's distant gaze sharpening from the bow like a hawk's, as Marcus slunk away, defeated but seething, his parting hiss a venomous vow. "Truth outs," Scarlet, enjoy the spotlight while it lasts. That night, adrift in the Blue Room's poster cocoon, Scarlet's confrontation with James shattered the last veneers, her voice raw over smuggled scotch. The evidence, the voicemails to ghosts, the shadowed courtship. How much was strategy? How much stalking? Did you see me? Or a conquest to cloak your solitude? James's confession spilled like a breached dam, his months of silent admiration, devouring her exposés on corporate malfeasance as if they were sonnets. The fabricated trail not malice but desperation to protect their fragile facade from Marcus's wolves. Each word a bridge from deception to devotion, his hands trembling as he cupped her face. I saw you, Scarlet, from the first byline that gutted me with its truth. The slap, fate's mercy. The kiss, inevitable. From the rubble of that midnight reckoning, confessions unfurled like petals in a hothouse bloom. James and Scarlet's raw admissions in the Blue Room's moonlit hush catalyzing a metamorphosis, where the facade's scaffolding crumbled not into ruin but revelation, their voices weaving through the velvet drapes like threads of a tapestry long half-woven. James, the stripped of CEO armor to the vulnerable architect beneath, his Harvard polish flayed by Eleanor's forge, his bachelor fortress breached by Scarlet's unyielding gaze, bared the architecture of his obsession, not predation, but a quiet vigil born of isolation, her articles on ethical lapses in his industry a siren call that echoed his own suppressed scruples, prompting anonymous tips to her inbox and fabricated chance encounters scripted in solitude. I built walls of wealth to hide the boy who lost his parents to a merger's fallout. Eleanor's empire a cage of gold. But you, with your ink-stained fury, picked the lock. He murmured, his fingers tracing the sapphire necklace at her throat, a heirloom from her Ohio gran that he'd noticed, in their lore but cherished in stolen glances. Scarlet, her journalist's skepticism yielding to the ache of reciprocity, confessed her own slates of heart. The plaza's slap a reflex not just of outrage but exhaustion from Derek's diminishment, her bylines a shield against a world that saw her as too ambitious for love's softer scripts, yet James's impulsive kiss had cracked that armor, his protective stance amid Marcus's barbs stirring a longing for partnership untainted by transaction. We started as contract and camouflage, she whispered, her green eyes luminous in the casement's glow. But these weeks, your laughter at my terrible golf swing on the east lawn, the way you defended my rust, belt roots to Weatherby's snobbery, it's eroded the edges, turned pretense to pulse. Their embrace that night was no performance but pilgrimage, lips meeting in the shadowed alcove where balcony met bedchamber, a kiss that tasted of salt tears and sweet surrender, hands mapping scars both visible, his faint dueling mark from a youthful fencing mishap, and invisible hers, the faded ink of a lover's name tattooed in youthful folly. Dawn crept in with tentative light, finding them entwined in whispered blueprints for dissolution. The contract's ceremonial torching planned for the estate's private dock at low tide. Marcus's dossier commandeered by Eleanor's network of retainers, their real courtship to unfold in unscripted strokes clandestine weekends in the city, her guiding him through Brooklyn's graffiti alleys where street art mirrored her exposé's raw truth, him introducing her to hidden speakeasies where jazz lilted like liberated secrets. In that chrysalis of candor, the facade transmuted, their love emerging not as fairy tale flourish but hard-won harvest, roots delving deep into the fertile soil of mutual unmasking. Outmaneuvering Marcus proved less a battle than a ballad of calculated concessions and Eleanor's unassailable authority. The cousins' serpentine schemes slithering to a halt amid the estate's labyrinthine corridors where every whisper echoed back, amplified by loyalty's unyielding walls. The morning after their confessional dawn, as mist clung to the rose gardens like gossamer veils, Eleanor summoned a war council in her sanctum, a vaulted study redolent of aged vellum and beeswax tapers. where Harrison delivered a silver tray of espresso and biscotti with the solemnity of a sommelier presenting rare vintages. Marcus arrived under the pretense of familial reconciliation, his Ferrari's growl fading into the gravel like a defeated dragon. But Eleanor's reception was glacial, her periwinkle eyes, sharpened by decades of boardroom skirmishes, dissecting his feigned contrition with the precision of a diamond cutter. "Your investigation, Marcus," she intoned, sliding across the mahogany his pilfered dossier, now annotated in her looping script with cross references to his own fiscal follies, from embezzled trust funds to leveraged buyouts gone belly up, reveals more about your desperation than any phantom deceit in James's heart. Scarlet, seated beside James with a poise honed by press room grillings, watched Marcus's facade crack, his smirk faltering into a rictus as Eleanor enumerated his transgressions. The yacht parties leaked, Cinderella, Barb traced to his anonymous tip line, the fabricated texts unmasked by digital forensics courtesy of her retained cyber experts, each indiscretion a thread unraveling his tapestry of ambition. James, his arm a steady anchor around her waist, interjected not with fury but finality. "This ends, cousin, not with enmity, but exile from our circle. Pursue shadows further, and you'll find the board's noose tighter than family ties." Marcus's retort, a venomous hiss of, "You'll regret crowning this opportunist," dissolved under Eleanor's edict, delivered with the finality of a guillotine's fall, disinheritance clauses invoked, his access to family ledgers revoked, a velvet exile to his European states, where he'd stew in self-made solitude. As he departed in a swirl of tire smoke and shattered pride, the estate exhaled, its manicured hedges seeming to straighten in collective relief. But Scarlet felt the victory's hollow echo. Outmaneuvering a viper healed no deeper wounds, only bought time for the true reckoning of hearts laid bare. That afternoon, amid the conservatory's hothouse blooms where orchids unfurled like secrets unveiled, they gathered. Eleanor, James, Scarlet, even Harrison lingering at the periphery with a paternal nod, to incinerate the contract in a silver ashtray, its flames devouring clauses of convenience as Eleanor raised a toast in heirloom crystal. "To truths unearthed and loves unfeigned, may your union be the empire James truly inherits." In that perfumed hush, the Scarlet's hand in James's felt not like chains dissolved but covenants renewed, their embrace a silent vow amid the petal-strewn floor. From facade's fragile scaffold to love's unyielding arch, they'd outwitted not just Marcus, but the specters of doubt that had shadowed their improbable path, culminating in a heartfelt commitment that wove their slap-kiss odyssey into a tapestry of enduring romance. Scarlet and James's union blossomed beyond the Hamptons' gilded gates into a life unscripted and unassailable, where mutual respect flowered in the fertile ground of shared vulnerabilities and family support, bloomed like Eleanor's prize roses under vigilant care. The dissolution of their contract marked not an end but an epiphany, celebrated not with fanfare but intimacy, a pre-dawn sail on the estate's vintage yawl, where dawn's first light gilded the waves as they scattered the ashes over the sound, James's voice husky with emotion reciting amended vows. "I pledge not possession, but partnership, not performance, but presence eternal." Scarlet, her auburn tresses whipping in the salt-laced breeze, reciprocated with a journalist's unflinching truth, "From your shadows I drew my light, from my fire you forged your hearth. Together, we author our forever, unaided and unbound." Eleanor's blessing, delivered over a clandestine brunch in the conservatory where hybrid peonies nodded approval, sealed their legitimacy with pragmatic grace. "You've earned not my empire, James, but my trust, a rarer currency still," her eyes misting as she clasped Scarlet's hand. "And you, my dear, have tamed the untamable, proving love's ledger balances not in ledgers, but in lives intertwined." Family support extended like olive branches. Harrison's discreet honeymoon, packing of their escape to a Tuscan villa, Eleanor's gift, redolent of Nano Blackwood's ancestral vines, where they wandered cypress-shaded paths. James confessing boyhood dreams of simplicity amid the olive groves, Scarlet unveiling her unwritten novel's outlines under star-pricked skies. Their nights a symphony of rediscovery, where touches mapped not conquest but communion. Returning to Manhattan's maelstrom, they navigated the media's maw with defiant authenticity. Joint interviews where Scarlet eviscerated Derek's lingering smears with scalpel-sharp facts, James unveiling a foundation for ethical journalism in her name, their red carpet appearances less poses than proclamations, hands clasped against flashbulbs like shields forged in fire. Marcus's exile rippled into irrelevance, his European exile yielding only sporadic sour grapes via tabloid proxies, while Eleanor's boardroom ascension of James, bolstered by Scarlet's strategic insights on corporate transparency, cemented their legacy as a power duo unbowed by birthrights or betrayals. Years unfurled in this verdant vein a daughter, Elara, born under harvest moons with her father's azure gaze and mother's indomitable spirit. Lazy Sundays in the estate's rose garden where Eleanor, softened by grand motherhood, regaled Elara with tales of steel-spined ancestors, Scarlet and James exchanging glances laden with the quiet miracle of their making, unscripted romances woven into the warp, impromptu Paris weekends tracing Hemingway's haunts, where Scarlet's bylines graced global pages and James's reforms silenced critics, anniversaries marked not with jewels but journals, pages filled with letters tracing their arc from Facad's folly to love's latitude. In this happily ever after, earned through tempests tamed and truths embraced, their journey from Slap's sting to kisses kindling evolved into an enduring epic, a testament that true love thrives not in perfection's sterile bloom, but in the wild, resilient garden of mutual surrender, where every dawn whispered, from pretense to passion they'd chosen and conquered, there forever.